president is fond of saying, and I could put up a succession of tweets. I remember it was a Saturday, March of 2017, I guess, when he first, they just found out Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower. You know, it's really all about you, and there was no Trump Tower aspect to this. But my point, Carter, is simply the investigation began before you. And it was taking place with regard to you at a time when you'd cut your tie with the Trump campaign.
We could talk for hours on a lot of those points, Michael, but let me kind of cut to that, the point on the series of tweets on March 4, 2017. 2 weeks later, the same person that the following month, the same month as our interview, Mr. Comey filed that fraudulent FISA warrant. You know, he testified in Congress on March 20th that what he was saying, there was no evidence of that. To the contrary, I spent my office when I used to work in New York is right next door to Trump Tower. I was in and out of there quite frequently. The Starbucks coffee, the cafe downstairs. So there was absolutely spying in Trump Tower. There's no question about that.
I want to take a listen to President Trump's reaction to the Texas shooting and the calls for changes to gun laws. Here's what he said.
We're looking at a lot of different bills, ideas, concepts. It's been going on for a long while. Background checks. I will say that for the most part, sadly, if you look at the last 4 or 5, going back even 5 or 6 or 7 years, for the most part, as strong as you make your background checks, they would not have stopped any of it. So it's a big problem.
You know, Linda, whether you're talking about this particular shooting or more broadly, you're just talking about this issue that we're seeing on this recent spate of attacks. I mean, this one specifically, there's 7 people dead. There's a 17-month-old girl who's been shot in the face. Is this the right tone just to be talking about what shouldn't be done, what couldn't have stopped it, or should the president be talking about what can be done to address what is clearly an issue that needs to be dealt with?
Well, a normal president would in fact be doing that. He'd be offering solace and he'd also be offering solutions. But this particular president, whenever he does put his toe in the water to suggest, well, maybe we do need to look at some changes to gun laws, then the NRA calls him up or he calls the NRA up and he changes his mind. You know, there's no one single solution. You know, background checks isn't going to solve it. There are a host of different issues, background checks, eliminating these weapons of war from our streets. Nobody has a right to have an AR-15 gun. That's a weapon that was created to be used in wartime.
What do you think? Listening to the president and also just to what seems to be, Nair, this accumulation now, do you think there is a point where Americans say enough? Or are they becoming immune? Or are they starting to reach the limit? What do you think?
Well, we are seeing that people are not in line with the president right now, or I can say the president is out of line with the American public. Universal background checks are highly popular, but at the same time, when you have 58 Americans killed in the last month alone by gun violence, we are getting numb to it, and we're not seeing the type of leadership that we want, either from Congress or the President of the United States. It's now breaking down at the state level, and states we see that have passed background checks, red flag laws, have reductions in gun violence. So there are correlations, and there's certainly the emotion that we're looking at behind wanting to get gun laws.
I mean, when you look at universal background checks, the numbers are staggering, right? You're talking 9 in 10 Americans who want to see this, and yet there's no movement on it. The Senate is going to come back next week. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has made it clear that he's not going to tackle these issues of when it comes to gun laws and addressing that issue. Is there anything that would push him in, as we enter this election year, Jeremy, to do that? He wants a clear signal from the White House, but we're not seeing a clear signal.
Well, I had asked the president during one of these White House departures a few weeks ago whether he was going to show the leadership that some Republicans might need in order to get on board with some of these measures, including background checks, for example. And the president, his answer was, you know, I don't think I need to do that. He doesn't feel a need to lead on this issue to take Republicans further than they are comfortable. We heard him initially talking about potentially supporting expanding background checks. Now he is very much walked away from that. And the reason ultimately is that the White House is looking at this through an extremely political lens, and they don't necessarily see any benefit to going further than the president's base is demanding that he go. And certainly the president's base on guns doesn't want him to necessarily take any action to further restrict the sale of weapons. So the White House doesn't see this as a political benefit for them. So what we're seeing is them discussing mental health and other issues.
And then there's another proposal that we've seen from a Republican Texas State Representative Matt Schaefer. He wrote on Facebook after the shooting about the growing calls for reform. He said, quote, "I say no to red flag pre-crime laws, no to universal background checks, no to bans on AR-15s or high-capacity magazines, no to mandatory gun buybacks. What can we do? Yes to praying for victims, yes to praying for protection, yes to praying that God would transform the hearts of people with evil intent." Ray, are Americans powerless?
Well, Representative Schaefer offers a classic false choice. You know, it's possible to get to work in Austin on changing the laws in Texas and pray for the victims at the same time. Both have their place in a response. If you're a person who wants to keep the status quo on guns in America, congressional paralysis plus federalism equals never having to do anything. Texas is only in the middle of the deck when it comes to gun ownership, around 21st among all the states. It's number 2 in the number of people who die every year from firearms, only behind California, which has 11 million more people.
Ray, thank you so much.